Okay, well, I can see that quite a few people have joined, and I'm sure that more will continue to do so as we get started. But let's jump right in. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Taves, and I am the Communications and Engagement Program Manager for Partners in Project Green. And I am very happy to welcome you all here to this installment of the Green Economy webinar series, Creating a Resilient Sustainability Strategy and Lessons from COVID-19. You'll see a number of housekeeping items up there on the screen. I would like just to draw your attention to, you can submit questions at any time via the questions tab on your toolbar. We'll track those and get to them during the Q&A portion of our event here today. And also a note that we will be doing a recording and that will be distributed to everybody following the session. And you can share that out with your friends and colleagues that were not able to attend today. Also to note that we will be having a networking session immediately following today's webinar. There will be a link that will appear in the chat. You can just click on that link as this webinar draws to a close and we'll join our networking session. It's a wonderful opportunity to connect with our speaker as well as your fellow attendees. We'll just move to the next slide and just do a brief overview of the agenda for the day. So I will do a small introduction to what we've been up to over here at Partners in Project Green, and then we'll welcome Scott Hendershot, who is the Senior Manager of Sustainability at Pratt Whitney, to share with us his experience in creating a resilient sustainability strategy and lessons from COVID-19. I mentioned that there will be an opportunity for questions and answers, and then we'll move to our networking room. So just to give a short update on what Partners in Project Green and TRCA have been up to, we're here doing our webinar series right now, and I will dive into that a little bit more. I'd like to take this opportunity to draw your attention to the At Home with Nature program that TRCA has been running. So this is a fantastic way to find activities and resources and videos, things that can help you and your family and your social network connect to nature and to the cultural heritage that is here in the TRCA jurisdiction. So I encourage you to check that out at that link that's listed on that slide. Lots of fantastic resources to be found there. And then we can move to the Green Economy webinar series, which we are doing another installment of right now, but you can also see all of the webinars that we've done so far this year up there on the screen. I encourage you to go take a look at those. If you weren't available to join us live for them, you can find them at partnersinprojectgreen.com/resource. You can see all of the recorded webinars as well as all of the resources associated with them. It's a great opportunity to catch up on what we've been doing. And then I will spend a little bit of time highlighting the next two topics. Just want to flag too that the newsletter is a great way to stay in the loop on all of the sessions that Partners in Project Green is running, and you can see the link there. So the next slide shows a little bit more about the session that we're hosting on September 24. We're very pleased to have Enviropod and the Council of the Great Lakes region joining us to share two plastics diversion pilot success stories. So there's a lot of talk about plastic and the importance of keeping it out of our waterways these days, and we've got two case studies on groups that have done this quite successfully. So please do join us for that. You can register today at partnersinprojectgreen.com/events. The next webinar will be in October 29, where we'll be focusing on energy monitoring technologies. So as we all know, you cannot manage what you do not measure, and 3M has been very successful at managing their energy through monitoring systems. So they're going to share with us their success stories and lessons learned on this webinar on October 29. You can register for that today at partnersinprojectgreen.com/events. I would like to draw your attention to our SME Energy Management Consortium because we only have a few more weeks where we can accept members into this program, and we don't want to leave any money on the table. We have about $15,000 per participant to help improve their energy management and their energy performance. So if you are a small to medium-sized enterprise who would like to take advantage of this program, or should you know anybody who fits that description, please do reach out to us. Nathaniel Magner, you can see his contact information up there on the screen, and he'll also be in the networking portion should you have any questions for him about this particular program. So we hope to hear from a few of you on this one. I'm very pleased to be able to share with you this fantastic exchange that we've just completed. So for those of you who don't know, our materials exchange program finds homes for materials that would otherwise be destined for landfill. And in this particular case, we worked with a large Canadian company who found themselves with a overabundance, a huge amount of crayons and activity books that they just were not able to use anymore, and they were destined for landfill, and they did not want to see that happen. So they made the call to us. And when we're talking a huge amount, we're talking 50 skids, which is 25 tons of material. And I really just couldn't wrap my head around that. So I had to think of it in this term. So a rhinoceros weighs 1 ton. So if you can picture in your mind right now a rhinoceros, and then picture 25 rhinoceroses all standing there together, that is the amount of material that was going to end up in landfill that is now being used in 16 schools and local nonprofits. So a pretty fantastic result from this material exchange program. And if you have materials like that, things that you just don't know what to do with and you don't want to see them end up in landfill, please do reach out to us. Connie is very good at what she does. Her email is up there on the screen, and we can help you find homes so that things don't end up in landfill, that they can be reused. And I'm very excited about this program. I'm a little bit biased because I work with our team to run it. But we are pleased that the People Power Challenge is up and running. We've been going for a month, but that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for people to take advantage of it. This program really helps empower your people to drive your sustainability programming forward. And it really helps connect people, especially during this time of remote work and to physical distancing. So if this is something that you're interested in exploring, please do reach out to me. I'm very happy to talk about the program. Finally, I'd like to draw your attention to our Natural Infrastructure and Climate Resiliency White Paper that is available to download. You can see the link right there on the screen. You can also check out the Renew article. So this white paper will help illustrate the importance of natural infrastructure, low impact design, green space, in how organizations can manage stormwater on their own sites and create green spaces for their employees and potentially even the community through those kinds of on-site management. So if that's something that is of interest to you, you can check out those links, and you can contact Eric, who leads that program over here at PPG for us. Well, I think that's quite enough out of me because I am very interested to hear from Scott. So we can flash his picture on the next screen. So Scott is a Senior Manager for Sustainability for Pratt Whitney Canada, and he is uniquely positioned to talk to this topic. He's worked in Pratt Whitney for a vast number of years in many different parts of the organization. That's what you truly need to drive a sustainability program forward, is clear knowledge of your organization and all of the different facets that impact something like that. So he will be able to speak very well to how to develop an integrated strategy, a resilient strategy, and he'll also talk about how COVID-19 tested that resiliency. So without any further ado, I would like to thank Scott for joining us and welcome his presentation here today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Can I be heard well?
Very well, thank you. I can hear you
Fantastic.
clearly.
Everyone, thank you very, very much for your time. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. These are unique opportunities for myself to be able to talk about, my experience and Pratt & Whitney's experience with respect to sustainability. And it's a very, very important one to me because it's obviously it's my career, and I've been working in this for almost a decade. But I just feel it's so vitally important to what sustainability is all about. Taking care of each other, taking care of the planet that takes care of us, all that good stuff. So today I'm going to talk to you about kind of almost a decade of progress that we've made at the company and the learnings that I've kind of gathered from it. Of course, it's going to be a snapshot because there's a lot of stuff that happened in a decade, and I have I'm going to speak for about 35 minutes or so we can have a good 15-minute Q&A at the end. But overall, first and foremost, I'm wishing that everyone is well and safe in these interesting times that we're currently living in, and that we continue to protect ourselves and others. And as well, I did want to have a quick shout out to the GTAA and congratulate them on their recent GHG reduction award that was recently awarded from the Airport Council International. Fantastic news. I know that Todd and team have done amazing stuff at the GTAA, so if they happen to be on the line, if not, super congratulations. Very proud to be in the Pearson Eco Business Zone. Pratt Whitney Canada is too as well. So all good. So what I'm going to talk to you again about today, I'm going to give you a couple initial slides about Pratt & Whitney in general and our larger corporation, Raytheon Technologies, but then kind of walk you through and give you a sense of how our vision was developed, how our goals were developed, and kind of where we're actually at today. And then I'm going to kind of finish off with a little bit of discussion on COVID. So go to the next slide. And this slide basically is just speaking about the organization as a whole. Originally, you guys may have been familiar with a company called United Technologies. United Technologies has actually recently merged with Raytheon. So we are actually now, we being Pratt & Whitney, are actually now owned by Raytheon Technologies. Previously, we were a part of UTC that included Carrier and Otis Corporation, the elevator and air conditioning corporation. They have been spun off. They're out on their own now. So what's interesting about this is it's kind of a unique opportunity for us because Pratt & Whitney, you can see here Collins Aerospace, Raytheon Intelligent, and Raytheon Missiles and Defense. We are basically only aerospace and defense now, whereas previously we were a little bit more broad. So we can kind of, there's a little bit more synergies involved too. So we're pretty excited about that. And what I'm going to focus on clearly is the Pratt & Whitney piece. Jennifer had mentioned at the start of the call that I'm working for Pratt & Whitney Canada. In fact, I kind of said at the end of my bio, as of the fall of last year, I'm proud to say that I'm actually working for Pratt & Whitney now. So I'm part of the overall Pratt & Whitney sustainability crew. But we started off at Pratt Canada, and you can see a lot of that. So we'll move to the next slide. This is the last intro slide, I promise, and then we'll get into sustainability as a proper. So very, very proud to work for this corporation, Pratt & Whitney. This is the overall larger corporation where we produce power for so many different platforms and aircraft. As you can see, helicopters, large turbofans, our turboprops that are primarily made from by Pratt & Whitney Canada and our Montreal area, and of course as well we have a military division primarily focused in the States. But the thing is, we do have a site in Mississauga at Dixie and Courtney Park that focuses primarily on actually turbofans and engineering and development. So what's really cool about Pratt & Whitney is the fact that we design and we build everything ourselves. So we have that sort of control, and that also gives us some very, very interesting levers. So moving on to the next slide here, the GTF, if you're not familiar with it, it's called the Geared Turbofan, which was developed by our partner our partner company, of course, Pratt & Whitney in the US. Absolutely, completely, and totally revolutionized the overall passenger aircraft market. You can see the significant reduction in numbers when it comes to comparable engines in its class, and is more or less kind of taken over this particular market for us, Pratt & Whitney in the larger commercial market. And what's really interesting about this is at the core of this engine, so the engine that basically, the turbine, the compressor, the bit that produces the power is actually shared with the Pratt & Whitney Canada PW800 platform, which powers medium to large size business jets. So not only are we kind of reinventing the overall commercial class, we're also reinventing the business jet sort of class to make them as efficient as possible. We certainly, though, realize that this is just one step. The company invested a lot of money and effort in producing this, and it's great, but we have lots more to do when it comes to sustainability, and that's what I'm going to talk about to you primarily today. So we'll go to the next one. So overall, as a company, Pratt & Whitney, we do have corporate goals, and we basically reset them every 5 years or so. These are flowed down from what used to be United Technologies, which is now Raytheon Technologies. And our goal sets are actually finishing this year in 2020, and we are in the process of actually creating our 2025 goal set. What's interesting about this is that there's a lot of numbers in this chart, and I'm not going to go through them, but what's interesting about this is that underneath the title you see in the upper left-hand part of this slide, you'll see Environment and Sustainability, becoming the best aerospace company for the world. That is a Pratt & Whitney brand, that is our image, that is our tagline that we've been using for a number of years now. the journey with which we got there started at Pratt Canada. I'm going to kind of talk you through that sort of whole exercise. But again, goals are one thing. The purpose of the slide is to show we do have goals. We've made some great progress, but there's more to it than just having hard targets and goals to continue our progress towards better environmental performance. So we'll go to the next slide. So the situation for the aviation industry in general, the most important thing is that we as an industry recognize that that we have an industry imperative to basically tackle what is in front of us. And I want to draw your attention to the funnel that you see at the bottom of the slide there, right? It says increasing pressure over time. Generally speaking, we use this model a lot to kind of describe the pressures and basically what we call squeezing the future, where on one side of the funnel, we actually have demand increasing, and on the other side of the funnel, we actually have resources decreasing. But on top of that, we actually have all these other elements that are emerging that are causing additional challenges and basically squeezing that funnel even more and basically applying pressure to the future, really, right? And you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with a good chunk of those in that red box if you're not familiar with all of them. But here's the good news. If you just click once more, Saba, what you'll find is basically sustainability can help us open up that funnel and be a driver for innovation and actually deliver value. And I'm going to talk a lot about value pieces today because people sometimes don't realize how important that is when it comes to sustainability. On the right-hand side of the chart, you'll see a couple snippets from a recent documentation or a recent report from ATAG. This is the Air Transportation Action Group. We are a funding member, of course. And in the graphic on the upper left-hand side, or the right side of the panel, you'll see aviation and sustainable development goals. You will see listed there the 17 UN sustainable development goals, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. What's interesting here is that the aviation industry, and of course ourselves as an engine producer, actually positively impact or support 15 of those 17 goals in helping basically achieve those sustainability goals for the UN. That said, we know we have lots of opportunities to actually improve how we do that, right? Because clearly using our engines provides impacts. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But we realize, again, the purpose of this slide too is we have pressures moving forward, but at the same time, we are already helping with achieve sustainability goals for the overall global, if you will. We have a lot more work to do. So we'll go to the next slide. So who has heard of the terms people, planet, profit? I think everyone has. I'm going to talk about each individual three very quickly here. So we're all familiar about the people side of sustainability, right? And what we at Pratt Whitney do every day is amazing. Like people originally, many years ago, perhaps including myself, almost 25 years ago when I started at Pratt, I was so excited to work for a company that produced gas turbine engines. I'm a mechanical engineer, the technology behind it, it never gets boring. It's pretty exciting stuff. But the great thing about sustainability is that it adds an additional purpose to the employees that work in Pratt Whitney. So not only are we working on amazing technology and improvements, et cetera, we can also basically add that sort of higher purpose or additional purpose, if you will, to the people that work at Pratt. So number one. Number two, if you click for me, Saba, is basically the planet. We know that the planet is struggling on many fronts. This is just a bit of a graphic to kind of give you a sense of where some of the areas and some of the boundaries where we're particularly struggling in. I think we're all familiar with climate change, but there's many others. But the important message here is that we do need to respect all of those systems on that center tile, pardon me. And then lastly, profit is perhaps one of the, I'm not going to call it a forgotten piece of sustainability, but it's really important, right? So we recognize, of course, and we know that it's been proven sustainability actually delivers profits. It's industry known, it's wide, it's clear, but we understand and we want to make sure we drive that home when we introduce our overall programs related to sustainability. If you do one more click for me, Saba, because we're an engine company, we produce one more click, we produce power. So we think about people, planet, power as our sort of tagline for the definition of sustainability. So we can go to the next one. So here's some additional connections. So we talk about value opportunities, and the purpose of this slide is to talk each a little bit about customers, about the financial impacts delivery to our shareholders, and the overall sustainability culture. The basically bolded statements on the right-hand side of the slide basically describe aspirationally where we ultimately want to be, okay, for each of these elements. So the first one is customers. You guys are probably already well known. Pratt & Whitney is known for dependable engines. That is our tagline. It's been there for almost 100 years. what we're trying to do with sustainability and all the work that we're doing is to add that sort of halo effect that not only are we dependable, but we're the most sustainable engine company, the most sustainable producer of power for flight. That's our purpose, ultimately, right? Shareholder value, pretty straightforward at the end of the day. Delivering maximum value for our shareholders is key, and we know sustainability is a strong lever for that. We spoke about that in the previous slide. And then the purpose piece at the bottom, including sustainability into an industry that's already fascinating in itself, really will further kind of draw interest in people working for our company if they know we really take this seriously for every single, not only employee, 43,000 people worldwide currently for working for Pratt Whitney, but for the entire globe. So next slide. So I'm going to walk you through 3 slides where I'm going to talk a little bit about and give you a sense of what the journey has been like, right? Start to finish. Bottom left-hand part of this screen, if you don't recognize him, this is Ray Anderson. If you don't know the name, look him up. Unfortunately, we lost him in 2011 to cancer, but he basically was the founder of Interface Carpet Company, one of the most successful business sustainability stories ever told. He's written many books. We actually had him speak at Pratt Whitney Canada back in 2009 to our executive ranks because our president was engaged. My current boss, who I'm still working for, actually got our president to read a book by another gentleman I'm going to talk about in a second. And long story short, we ended up getting Ray to speak to us about his vision and his company. And very proud to say, if you're not aware of it, he has for his company, Interface Floor, mission zero, no impact on the environment for 2020. They've already met it. They've met it and surpassed it. And now they're going to a restorative model. So incredible story there. But it kind of began there. And then we started our own journey at Pratt Whitney Canada in this case. So you'll see the logo there for Natural Step. We brought in this very impressive NGO to help us develop our goals and our vision. And part of that exercise was getting the right people and getting the right input from the right people. So bottom right, you'll see just a number of pictures of folks that were involved in a number of our workshops. But the logos that you see in the center of the screen, where a number of the different organizations are customers, our suppliers, etc., that we work with. We wanted to understand from them, what does sustainability for Pratt Whitney Canada mean to you, and how do you see it, kind of thing. Again, this is going back to sort of 2010, 2011. And on the upper right-hand side is basically the start of the original sustainability team from Pratt Whitney Canada, which I'm very proud to say I'm a member, or I was a member of, and still am. And that's how this sort of ball got rolling, if you will, and starting to develop our vision. Yeah, so this kind of was the seed planting, if you will. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about, this is an incredible story. I've told this many times and it continuously engages me. So what you'll see is a number of pictures. This is basically fall 2011. This is effectively when we launched our Pratt Whitney Canada sustainability goals, which you'll see in a moment. What you see is basically the vast majority of our executive ranks in a single room for half a day to officially kind of endorse and launch our goals that I spoke about in the previous slides. So you're saying, Scott, there's a lot of young children in that room. Are you saying your executives are children? Well, not quite, but they are actually children of Pratt Whitney Canada employees. They actually work, they go to school and daycare that's around the corner from the plant. This is actually shown in Montreal, okay? So what we ended up doing is that we tried to figure out what's the best way to engage our executive team when it comes to kicking off this official launch. So what we did is we had the kids do drawings for us to distribute to all the executives. So our director stood up in front of the room at the start of the session and says, we're trying to figure out how to best convince ourselves why we're doing this, why sustainability is important, why should we launch vision and goals, all that good stuff. The doors opened and basically 50 kids walked into the room and each individual executive got a little drawing by the child that basically said, thank you for thinking about my future. There was not a dry eye in the house, including some of the more, let's say, harder executives that were there. Really powerful story to show that's the reason we're doing it. We're not doing it for us. We're doing it for people beyond us. So really powerful moment. And I always like to tell that as part of the story. So go to the next slide. This is the last kind of slide of 3 when it comes to the development of our vision, right? So this is to give you a little bit more of an example of some of the execution that we have done in the last sort of 10 years or so, just a couple samples. So first off, upper left-hand corner, you see an actual picture of our PW150 engine. We did a detailed life cycle assessment, actually, of our sister of that engine, the PT6. You can see in the center of the graph. So we started to do not only a company life cycle assessment, which we did many years ago, back circa 2009, we started to get a better understanding of what the impacts of our engines are. And so, for example, we know that the use phase, right, with typical life cycle assessment terminology, is by far the most important when it comes to overall impacts. But at the same time, we know we have a lot more impacts that are within our control, within our levers with respect to how we design, produce, and build the engines. So that's one example. Another example is the center of the screen, and it revolved around education. So we actually produced a course called Sustainability 101, so that every single person at Pratt Whitney Canada saw this video. It was an animated video, got a lot of really good attention. We hired an amazing firm to do this for us, and it was a basic education of what sustainability meant and specifically what our goals were all about. And again, every single employee at Pratt Whitney Canada saw that, and as part of our sort of ongoing engagement and education strategy. But at this point, we also started to work with a larger Pratt Whitney organization, right? Because Pratt Whitney Canada, at the time when I was working for them, they were the pilot, right? And they kind of in a way still are with respect to really kind of pushing the needle when it comes to sustainability strategy and visioning and goals and such. And one good example of this is in the upper right-hand side, I had mentioned the book that our president of Pratt Whitney Canada at the time, John Sabas, had read, and it was by this gentleman here, Paul Hawken. If you don't know him, look him up too as well. The writer, the author of Ecology of Commerce, and a very, very strong environmentalist. The fact that we were able even to get him in the room to speak at a Pratt & Whitney executive forum to talk about the importance of sustainability and how we can, basically change our business was very, very, very powerful. We were so impressed to have him. He's a celebrity in sustainability in business. So fantastic thing there. But that just kind of gives you just a little bit of a sense how it's important to have top down. Absolutely, you need to have leadership support, but as well, you need to have a bit of a grassroots, not a bit of a grassroots, but a large sort of grassroots piece when it comes to bringing that whole sustainability engagement together. Very, very important to have both. So go to the next slide. So after all that, I literally just zipped through 10 years, by the way, in less than, 10 minutes or so. This is actually the Pratt Whitney Canada sustainability vision. Vision on the left-hand side, I mentioned before, becoming the best aerospace company, not in the world, we already are, we'd like to think, but for the world, taking care of the planet, taking care of spaceship Earth that takes care of us, and we as individuals sitting on this planet are all crew. That's kind of one of our taglines too. But we had it broken down, or we have it broken down into 5 individual goals. 2 based upon our products, 1 is based on emissions. Now this is not emissions coming out of our engines in our test cells. This is fleet emissions. We have tens of thousands of engines that are operating in the fleet right now, and we want to do what we can to actively reduce those emissions best we can with and in partnership with our customers. Sustainable products, the second product-based goal is about design, manufacturing, and service of our products more sustainably, really strongly revolves around our eco-design program that's currently active at Pratt & Whitney Canada and about to be ported over to Pratt & Whitney as well. Center, you'll see for our sites, a little bit more straightforward, but obviously critically important. Pratt & Whitney, we have 53 sites all around the world. Again, I mentioned before, 43,000 employees. For our sites, we're shooting for zero waste, which we define as a greater than 95% recycling rate. And then carbon neutrality, effectively carbon neutral for all of our energy sources at our sites, which by the way, does include the jet fuel that we burn at our sites when we test our engines for our customers. And then perhaps the most important piece is the people side. On the right-hand side, not only internally, but for us to be a positive influence on those outside the corporation. And examples of webinars like this is one of them. But we have a lot of influencing to do. But at the same time, we have a lot of work to do, of course, on our own front. So better products, better sites, and of course, overall working better as an organization. So the next slide, we have a set of goals that I just showed you. But what this is showing us basically is beyond that. So we're never just looking at, okay, we have a line in the sand and we want to achieve the goals that I just showed you. That's fine. And by the way, there's a lot more, obviously, technical and detailed information behind those goals, but that's the general level that we tend to talk about at these types of forums. In this, we want to make sure that we're not just looking at a set of goals on a line in the sand. We ultimately want to understand where we're headed for down the road. So right-hand side, you can see the engine. You can see a sense of what those elements of the ideal engine would be. For all we know, it may not be just a gas turbine engine in the future, but we know for sure that we want to be, you can see they're compatible alternative energy sources. We want to use no raw materials. We want it to be fully made from recycled materials. These kinds of things, right? That's critical to us. On the left-hand side, it's all about our sites. It's about our factories. We want to make sure that we do everything to make them as closed as possible and have our plants, our sites or factories, operate like plants, right? That's a nice sustainability tagline there. And then in the center, perhaps most important of all, it's about having driven people. engaging our people so that every single person in our organization has a part to play in moving that sustainability needle forward and making ourselves a more environmentally friendly and cost-effective company and value-added company, better for our shareholders, all that good stuff, people, planet, profit. So we always had this kind of in the background. And what's nice about it is that we're constantly modifying it, right? We want to make sure we always are kind of looking down the road for what could be, what could be. We'll go to the next slide, which talks a little bit about the Pratt& Whitney side of this. So I spoke about Pratt Whitney Canada up until now, but as it stands now, this is the evolution. So this is effectively what you see before you, the endorsement of the larger corporation, Pratt Whitney, of Pratt Whitney Canada's pilot sustainability program. So you can see a lot of the messaging that we had that I just showed you has been strongly ported over to Pratt Whitney. And now that our sustainability team, of course, is focusing on continuing to further develop this and further develop action plans, et cetera, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a few slides. But again, it's really about embedding sustainability in every single thing that we do. And again, just a note, to go back, way back to 2009, this is all based upon we understand our company footprint. Full stop. That was the very, very first thing we did, company level life cycle assessment. We know where our impacts are, and we know what we need to address. Now it's a question of getting to it. So the next slide is our sustainability toolbox. So this is really, really cool stuff. And this is sort of our 6 prime sustainability tools that we actually have active in the organization now, and that we're sort of working with to reduce our overall footprint and address our goals. The first is lean and green. I'm sure you guys have heard about lean processes. It's Six Sigma, all that stuff. This is all about adding the green elements to our existing ACE, what we call ACE, which is our lean processes at Pratt & Whitney and Raytheon. Adding that green element to it, adding the environmental, energy, water, and waste to those particular processes. A very, very powerful tool because we have so many events going on at any time during the year. It's a very, very impactful tool. The sustainability value assessment, this is a newer tool that we've developed that can be used, that basically adds the financial costs of waste, energy, and water basically, it's basically a glorified spreadsheet that basically takes your environmental impacts and basically converts them into dollars for all of our sites worldwide. So we know energy costs different. It's different in Canada versus the US, states versus provinces, for that matter, our sites that we have overseas. So you can actually put numbers to the environmental impacts. And very, very, very powerful tool that can be used in many different fronts. So we're starting to kind of get a lot more use of that as we move forward. BMPs is the next one, number 3, which stands for Best Management Practices. This is all about addressing one key thing, and I don't think people realize this as much as they should. Non-product output. It is estimated that typically in any industry, not just aviation, that 30% of production costs are wasted, meaning they're spent, but they actually don't go to the customer. So what we're trying to do with BMPs here as an example is to get at that 30% to understand where can we find efficiencies such that the customer doesn't pay for something they're not getting. Our customer wants an engine to put on their aircraft. They don't want the additional costs of the energy, water, and waste that they don't see. So that's what we're trying to get to with best management practices. And this is not just a Pratt & Whitney thing. This is a Raytheon Technologies thing across the board, where we are constantly keeping an eye on step-by-step processes for each of our sites to understand where those opportunities lie. And you can see the graphic on the right-hand side, a sample of some of those best management practices, which are kind of constantly getting updated as we sort of move forward as times change. But we're very, very knee-deep in that, especially during COVID times and the education piece. Sustainability focals, number 4, is about training. We're calling our workforce of the future, but basically training advocates within the organization to be sustainability gurus, basically, but within their part of the organization, be it finance, operation, engineering. So kind of developing that network of very, very well-educated sustainability professionals. And this is, of course, on top of the overall broad education that we provide the company as a whole. We want to have experts so we give them extensive training. For example, we have over 8 hours of training that we actually give these employees so that they can become very strong advocates and actually do sustainability within their job function. The next one, supplier sustainability, is about the overall corporate level, about asking our suppliers to ensure that they're following a minimum level of requirements when it comes to sustainability and how they operate their supply chain. But we're also starting to work it into our contracts for new programs, such that they start to look at what happens to your parts, let's say supplier A, at the end of their life. Are you going to take them back? so we can ensure they either get recycled or even better, reverted back into our own supply chain so we can make high value products from high value materials that have been retired, these kinds of things. So it's an important element, but it's relatively early days for us. And then finally, eco-design, which we started at Pratt Whitney Canada basically 4 or 5 years ago. It's a very intensive program that focuses a lot on materials of concern, material energy, the embodied energy that actually goes into our parts. So how efficient are we with not only the materials, but the energy that goes in to make our parts? I spoke about the engine life cycle assessment a number of slides ago. One of the levers that we have a very, very strong play with is basically the design of how our parts are actually made within our supply chain and how they're designed, how they're forged, how they're machined, all that good stuff. So our eco-design metrics that are now in place in our design system are actually being used to reduce the impacts of our new engines as they come off the line. So pretty cool stuff. It's evolving, and we're about to kind of do that as well on the Pratt Whitney side as we slowly start to port that over. But of course, Pratt Whitney Canada is trailblazing and basically breaking the ground for us. Okay, so that's that slide. So next slide. I think I'm good on time, by the way, everyone. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. So COVID response. This is kind of my last slide that I want to talk a little bit about today. And I have to say, I'm very, very proud and impressed with respect to how not only Pratt & Whitney has managed and continues to manage the COVID response, but as well our overall corporation, Raytheon Technologies, which we're under. Health and safety absolutely was number one. You know, it's fair to say, I think we would all say that. I'd like to think so. But you know, what we have done at Pratt & Whitney when it comes to protecting our employees that are actually still going back to work, we still have 53 active sites. We still have people that are going in to do the work for people that actually have to be on site. They're there. But what we have done to protect those employees to the best of our abilities and how we continue to adjust as times change. We know what's going on in the United States right now, very difficult times in particular areas of the States, and it's a moving target. So you can see the list on the top right-hand side. It's just a sense of what we've been doing and what we're in progress of doing. So you can see there the case monitoring, contact tracing, self-assessments for our employees before they come into work, distribution of thermometers through all of our sites for individuals to test themselves at home and as well on site, thermal scanning distributed at the vast majority of our sites. And also we've done some trials on wearable technologies for social distancing, and as well we're actually in the process of looking at actual testing for our sites where the case is needed. So really, really powerful stuff to ensure that the safety of our employees that are still going to work is maintained and actually minimize any incidents of COVID-19. And I'm very proud to say I work on the sustainability group, but I was very much involved in the thermometer piece of this because that's how our organization is. We pivoted, we adjusted, we needed to do a bit of a tactical pause on some of our initiatives on the sustainability front, pivoted, supported this. Guess what? I'm back on sustainability pretty well full-time again now because that's what we do. We are agile and persistent, as you can see there in that second line. The other thing is that there's an opportunity here for COVID-19 at our workplaces and at home. So one of the examples I love to give for the workplaces is we've had a number of sites that have found that basically lots more opportunities because there's so few people at our factories that we have much more opportunity to do sleeping factory tours, to look for energy savings opportunities, to look for water leaks, to look for anything along those lines. And we've also seen some of our sites adjust their building management systems, considering there's so few people there. So we don't see that opportunity. Normally we have to wait for holidays for those opportunities. So it's a unique opportunity that's been put in our lap here for COVID. So there's a bit of a silver lining. Don't get me wrong, COVID's a horrible thing, but we have to kind of look at to see what opportunities might be there. And on the personal front, I'm sure you guys have noticed it too as well, but for me, myself personally, I know that being able to maybe slow down a little bit, maybe smell a bit more of the roses, explore a little bit more of the communities around us, as opposed to running around and spending all that additional time commuting, which we don't have anymore in many cases. So there is silver linings. I just think it's important that we sort of look for it, and just a couple examples there. You know, the collaboration with our sites here, the third bullet that I have there about the sites, the business units and functions, it is a new normal, and it's continuing to change. And that collaboration piece is really clear because the pain that the folks are seeing at our sites, the folks that are still going in, is very, very different than it was before because they have a lot less support. So we need to be flexible when we're asking things to be done when it comes to developing, you know, sustainability mandates or environmental performance, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we need to be flexible. Again, going back to that sort of agile and flexible piece. Still need to look at short near-term pressures. And again, as I mentioned before, we have had to take a tactical pause on some of our initiatives, but that tactical pause is almost already lifted. Now we're kind of back on the train of continuing to focus on best practices and sustainability initiatives. And the new competencies piece is where we've been able to kind of focus doing right now, and actually will be continuing for the rest of 2020. You can see there where we're moving from tracking metrics to enabling via education, right? Sharing a lot more webinar work and touch bases kind of like this to keep people informed as much as possible, such that when we do return to the sites in a more sense of normalcy, we're better prepared. The company-wide e-learning, I mentioned one a number of slides before that we released a number of years ago. We're in the process of in production of producing another one for the entire of the 43,000 employees that we have, which is a second level overall sustainability course that actually talks to a lot of those tools that I showed you and gives the employees the tools and leverage and education on how to use those particular tools in their job functions. And then I mentioned the Sustainability Focals Network. We're actively trying to, in the process, I should say, of expanding that not only at Pratt Whitney Canada, but Pratt Whitney as well. And then at the end, though, what does the workplace and the workforce of the future look like? It's not going to be the same. I think we all know that. The question is, what is it going to look like? And I know us as a corporation at Pratt Whitney are certainly starting to look at that. We have teams that are already in place for that. But it's something I think that we all should be having a look at, because there is going to be opportunities, no doubt. I know, for example, had done a bit of an analysis on what is the environmental impact of us working from home versus less people at the plant. You have your commuting savings, so if you include those additional outside scope 1 and 2 emissions, you have those impacts, but at the same time you have some additional emissions because you're working from home, you have the HVAC, the lighting, all that stuff. So we've kind of done those sort of analysis, and it turned out to be a bit of a wash actually. But things like that we have to pay attention to, because we know that we probably won't be going back to that same office that we did before, and we want to make sure that we take advantage of any opportunities that are put in front of us that this unlikely COVID situation has provided for us. So we're just trying to kind of keep our blinders open as much as possible to make sure that when we do go back, we do it in the most efficient possible way. And it's very possible that some of us won't go back, and I think we would all sort of agree with that. So the next slide, so that was it for COVID. So this is kind of my sort of finishing slide. Give me, just stop there for a sec, Saba. So our industry has done some pretty amazing stuff over the years. There's absolutely no question. I don't think there's any argument there. We can click one more and just to kind of give you a sense of what we've done, since the early 1900s for, again, almost 100 years. It's actually over 100 years now, from the first flight all the way over to the bottom right-hand side there in 2016, when we actually released the geared turbofan to the market. And one little interesting point there I'll point out is that airlines that have started to fly again a lot more in the last, say, month or two, as COVID kind of slowly starts to get a little bit more under control, airlines have been using their fleet using GTFs because they're more efficient, obviously from a fuel burn perspective, from a cost perspective. So isn't that interesting, right? Our products are being used because they're more sustainable. So that's obviously fantastic news for us as a company, and also for the environment. But we've done amazing things. We love challenge. That's what we do at Pratt & Whitney. It's all about keeping people safe up in the air, bringing people together, bringing products together, but we want to do it more sustainability. So guess what? We recognize that as our next challenge, and I think it's the next challenge for all of us. So one more click, Saba. It is, and we're saying here, as COVID kind of teaches us lessons, it's even more importantly the next great opportunity for us I would argue that as a human species. So that's the kind of way we sort of see it in the sustainability team at Pratt & Whitney. And I think with that, 1:44 p.m. within 1 minute of my time. Wow. Anyway, thank you very, very much for your time and listening, guys.
The timing was impressive, but also just the sheer amount of content was impressive. I think I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording because I have so many interesting notes that came up. I think one of the things that really struck me the most was just, yes, you've got this wonderful presentation that you were able to deliver in 35 minutes, but you could see all of the work that really was behind it all. And I think, the fact that this was built on 10 years, it wasn't just like, okay, we're going to do this sustainability strategy, check mark, you've built this over a decade and really looked at every aspect from your people to the externalities of environmental impacts to your your products. Like it's really a multifaceted, every aspect of the organization and of the sustainability journey has really been thought through. So it's very impressive. Your commitment is very inspiring.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think just to
Mhm,
that point, I mean, it's a never-ending journey, right? This journey is
mhm,
never going to stop. Sustainability does never stop.
mhm,
It's infinite at the end of the day, so it's constantly changing. And just maybe we'll just kind of tie in with that, Jennifer. Is that what people often ask, what are some of your biggest challenges, right? I mean, I think you have to be used to understanding that you're going to set a plan, you're going to try stuff. Some of the elements won't work. That's okay. You're gonna get yourself back up and start again.
mhm.
So it's ever evolving, and for example, COVID just a really good example of another situation where we needed to pivot.
Mhm.
So you have to be used to to be constantly changing your strategy in a way, but having that overall sort of strong vision pulling you forward really does help.
Yeah.
In moving it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I'm getting distracted by all the fantastic questions that we've gotten. So we're going to dive into those. We're going to get through as many as we can in the next 15 minutes, and if we can't get to them all, we will follow up with everyone to answer them. So I'm just going to answer them or ask them in the order that they came in. So first off. Can you address the fuel issue? Does H2 have a place? And if so, what are the challenges? And if not, why?
Yeah, hydrogen is a really really good example of actually something that as of recently, when I say recently, I would say like in the last sort of year or two overall at Pratt Whitney, it's becoming a little bit more to the forefront. Actually, hydrogen itself, there's a lot of challenges with it, right? When it comes to having it on board, the number of different ways you can actually have it on board, be it liquid or compressed. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. From an engine perspective, our thinking, if you asked us as a snapshot in today from a technology perspective, it's very likely that for the larger applications, commercial aviation, the larger airlines, that something like a more sustainable fuel like hydrogen with a gas turbine engine will likely be for the foreseeable future the response from a sustainability and environmental reduction perspective. But hydrogen still has a ways to go. So it's a little bit off when it comes to sort of developing and certifying the technology, but it's more so around weight and how you manage the economics of storing that weight on the aircraft itself. And technically, it's really a storage and a weight issue, and of course the technology of having hydrogen on board and how you deliver it. But the other piece on sustainable alternative fuels, or we actually call it sustainable alternative jet fuels, or SAJF, that is obviously a rapidly expanding place, and we have our eyes on the ball with respect to that, as do most of the airlines. The current way the industry is looking at it now is that basically alternative fuels are produced from various renewable feedstocks and then used and combine with Jet A1, the regular fossil base, to produce a blended, already certified drop-in fuel. So the engine doesn't care, doesn't really actually even see the difference. That's the way the kind of industry is going forward. The problem is, or the challenge is supply. It's about supply and cost and
Mhm.
demand to the industry in general. There's a lot more demand than supply is available. So it's a rapidly expanding space, I should say, with a lot of economic levers around it. But we're certainly aware, and we keep keeping our finger on the pulse because we're interested in it for us too to reduce our factory
Mhm.
footprint, right? But it's
Mhm.
not the be all end all solution. It's only one of the aspects.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have a question around 3D printing. Do you use 3D printing to save time and money?
We do. We've done some pretty good work too, as well as understanding the life cycle impacts of 3D printing versus regular, not printing.
Mhm.
Basically, cut machining out a part from a piece of metal instead. There's impacts, of course,
Mhm.
with respect to producing the powder in the first place. So 3D printing, people think, well, there's no waste. Correct. But there actually is environmental impacts of actually producing the chips or the powder itself to
Mhm.
actually produce the printing. It's early days, generally speaking, for aviation when it comes to our parts with additive, simply because of the technology and the certification process at the end of the day. But it's as time goes on, as I would say, sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago, we're starting to do more and more of it, but it's still a relatively small part of our engine as it
Mhm.
stands today. But certainly, yeah, we continue to develop and use AD.
Okay, thank you. All right, next. We would love to hear or love to know what efforts Pratt& Whitney are doing to develop alternative energy sources such as electricity or hydrogen. I know that some airlines are experimenting with biofuels. So you touched on that a little bit, but I didn't know if you
Mhm.
wanted to expand if you're developing alternative energy sources.
Yeah, so just quickly to finish off the biofuel side, we at Pratt& Whitney Canada actually, with the support of Pratt& Whitney, a number of years ago, were very much and heavily involved with research with the governments of Canada and various firms when it came to developing the whole concept of specifications for biofuels. So our engines were used for a lot of combustion testing. We did that a number of years ago, but we're kind of past that stage now in the industry where there's a number of different certified pathways that are available and certified to be certified drop-in fuels for replacements for Jet A1. So we've kind of stepped
Mhm,
away from that because we've kind of already added the value there from a jet fuel perspective. So it's really kind of the industry that's driving that now. But on the renewable fuel side, when it comes to our operations itself, so when it comes to electricity, let's see, green natural gas or any other resources, energy that we use on our sites, including solar, of course, we're absolutely doing what we can to have either local on-site presence of renewable energies or connections with local PPAs. Depending on where we are in the world, there's a lot of factors that will decide on whether or not we're going to invest in any of those renewable energies locally to our sites. But certainly it is very much supported by our ultimate carbon neutral goal, right? That's where we're trying to head towards. So we are supportive, but it really does depend on the local economics and what resources are available.
mhm. Well, it just speaks to how local some of these solutions really need to be.
Very much so.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
even the alter it's interesting, just the last piece, it's a
Yeah.
fascinating subject on the alternative fuel piece. It's the same thing. The alternative fuels are being produced at very different areas in the world, right? So sometimes, we're even looking at, does it make more sense to have different suppliers locally versus having the fuel shipped all over the place, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
we're very aware of the moving targets there.
For sure. Thank you for that. Okay, so more heat kind of questions. Do you use heat recovery, like Rankine cycle, organic Rankine cycle, pardon, to make electricity from your heat during production?
It's such a fantastic question, and I could tell you we've done significant investigation and research into trying to recover not only heat but thrust, residual thrust from the engines and our test cells, or for that
Mhm.
matter, in our dynamometer test cells for our turboprops. The most promising form of that is actually electric dynamometers for our turboprops. So the dynamometer actually simulates the propeller in the front. So when we actually do our engine test, that's the simplest way of extracting energy from the engine. The turbofans are much more difficult. Simply because of the amount of infrastructure that is required to put in the test cell, number one, and just all that overall sort of engineering piece. But number two, it's the fact that we don't run our engines consistently and long enough. We'll put an engine in a test cell for a couple hours, we take it out, and we ship it to the customer. So if we had engines running 24/7, 7 days a week, it's a different story. So it's very difficult. The economics of it are tough, and the amount of energy that we would get out of it, it's difficult. So very difficult to turbofans, although we've significantly looked at it and we haven't stopped. But as it stands now, it's not high on the priority list. But electric dynamometers and converting either our existing test cells or new test cells being built with electric dynos as opposed to water-cooled dynos, which is what we use now, is definitely much higher on the priority list.
Gotcha. Okay. This is a follow-up to that. Do you track emissions of existing engines?
I'm not sure. Well, yes. I'm not sure if we're talking about in our test cells or in the field. Our engines, when they get certified to go into basically commercial use, they're rigorously certified with respect to the emissions, and we're constantly reducing them. The newer the engine model, the better the emissions are across the board. This isn't just GHG, which is obviously a direct connection to fuel burn, but it's also about NOx and carbon monoxide, all that good stuff. So we measure them as part of the certification process. We're not consistently measuring them as each production engine goes out the door, but we have a very, very strong handle on exactly what our engines are producing because once we certify them, we have a very good idea. And for customers, they'll measure if they need to, but it's generally something that's not needed to be
Thank you. Now, I swear I did not write this question, but the question is, how has Partners in Project Green factored into your journey, into Pratt& Whitney's journey?
I mentioned That's a great question. I'm surprised you're asking it, Jennifer. That's interesting. No, I'm so so happy that we Pratt Whitney Canada Plant 22. Again, Dixie and Courtney Park. We've been involved with you guys for a very, very long time. I'm going to say it's over a decade now.
Yes, yes, it is.
And the TRCA. I mean, we're very proud to be there. I think for us, it's really about the Big C collaboration. We've learned so much from Partners in Project Green, and of course, like to think that we've passed on similar. It's really it's a two-way street here. It's true collaboration. And I think about the Energy Leaders Consortium, which we've been probably the strongest connected to because of our energy. It hasn't just applied to our particular plan. I can take those lessons, and our teams can take those lessons to all of our sites worldwide. So it's a very, very powerful thing, and we're in aviation, obviously, and we're talking with folks that are in the food industry, that are
Mhm,
within the packaging industry. It's very, very different, and yet the lessons that are shared are huge. So
mhm.
it's not just a collaboration too, but kind of feeling that we're staying connected and we're not missing anything. That's a huge opportunity. So that's a big. It's really that's it. Beautiful.
Well, you've been such a wonderful partner to have over the years, and we're so grateful to you for sharing all of this wonderful information, but also just being a steadfast partner and Partners in Project Green.
Thank you.
It's interesting when we created the name, we didn't realize how important that partner piece was. Well, we did, but like it truly has been the biggest component of the work we do is we truly partnering with such wonderful organizations such as Pratt
Thank
and
you.
Whitney. So thank you for that. Okay, I think we can sneak in one more question before we hop over to the networking portion. But first, an audience comment that says, thanks, well presented and very informative, which I would like to roundly second.
Thank you.
But the question that we'll jump to is there an R&D budget for developing new fuels?
Not from a Pratt& Whitney perspective. As you guys probably know, or if you don't, our R&D budgets on both sides of the border in Pratt Canada and developing new engines, and the same in the US, is very, very large. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's very large. That's what we do. We develop new technology, right? So from an engine perspective, absolutely. For fuels, it's not our industry per se, right? We obviously
Mhm,
need the fuel, we use the fuel, but we, from a budget perspective, from our company perspective, don't have it. But when it comes to state level, provincial level, or country level, that's a bit of a different story. And I'm not sure if I can kind of comment it from that perspective. I'm not really completely and totally up to speed, but I would imagine there's no question there is governmental support for developing biofuels. That there is no question about that. But to what level in each of the different countries, I'm not really kind of on top of that. So
okay.
uh, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can sneak in this one that just came in then. Are carbon credits a component of financial reporting or your cash flows, your statements, all of that? Do you consider carbon credits when you're doing your financials?
No, as it stands now, what used to be United Technologies and is now Raytheon Technology, we don't, the whole concept of credits, we're really primarily focused on energy and efficiency and reduction first. But the concept of credits and proper gold standard offsets and all that kind of good stuff is becoming more to the forefront now. We're starting to kind of look at it. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, from a reporting perspective, no, I don't think we include it, unless, of course, if it's part of the grid, like sort of in Ontario. Of course, we have a relatively green grid.
Mhm.
We take into account the reduction in emissions from the grid itself. But as far as the credits and financial statements, no. But we believe it is the concept of offsets and credits and such is going to be part of the future, but it's only one part.
Mhm, mhm. Well, and I think that speaks to everything. It's all only one part, right?
Yeah,
Mhm,
it's a big matrix, and it's one element, but it's certainly one of many.
mhm. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Scott. I really loved hearing you speak. I always do, and that was a
Thank you.
great presentation. So now you will all see the networking link that has come up in your chat. We invite you to jump over to that now. We will leave it up here for a little bit so people have the opportunity to do so. Partners in Project Green staff will be there. Scott will be there, so we will be able to ask him even more questions and dive into all this a little bit more. But thank you all for joining us on this edition of the Green Economy webinar series, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Again, that's microplastic diversions, and it's coming up on September 24th with EnviroPod and the Council of the Great Lakes region to share some best practices and lessons learned from 2 pilot studies to reduce plastics from entering our waterways. So you can register for that. We'll see you then, and I'll see you all over in the networking room. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks all.